What is going on, guys? This is Joe Young. Finally, I'm able to actually sit down, make this video, set up a bunch of my computer stuff, find the time to actually do this, just because the last 11 days I've been literally waking up and just going to the house and just moving and packing. Oh, it's crazy. I'm sure you guys are dying to know how the move went. Before I actually give you guys an update on the whole move and how that went, I actually want to bring up a really cool charity slash idea that FishTube and Aquashella are teaming up to do. So just a really quick brief summary for you guys that aren't aware of what's going on. Every video that's being made and that's being posted with the hashtags, all this will be in the description below. $100 goes to one of these charities, either freshwater or saltwater, and I'll also link those projects below so that you guys can read up on that. But pretty much it's a really cool thing that Aquashella and FishTube are doing. Pretty much a lot of the proceeds from Aquashella, they're actually donating $100 for every video that's being made. So you don't have to be a big YouTuber, you don't have to even have any subscribers. As long as you make a video with the criterias and have these specific hashtags, $100 will be donated to one of these foundations that you actually choose. So Aquashella was actually started last year. I didn't actually get a chance to go, but this year I'm actually going to attend Aquashella. It's actually on March 30th and 31st. It's a Saturday and a Sunday. Unfortunately, I'm probably going to be able to only make it on Saturday. So if you guys are interested in actually going and actually checking it out and possibly wanting to meet me, I'll be there on Saturday for sure. Aquashella this year is actually doing two events. The one in March is actually going to be in Dallas, Texas. So if you guys are actually in that area, make sure you guys check it out. And if you guys are free, and have some time to kill, maybe fly in. I'm pretty sure flights are pretty cheap around that time frame anyways. For the charity, I would like to have my proceeds go towards the Coral Restoration Foundation, just because not a lot of reefers are actually posting. So I'd like to kind of help jumpstart that. Notice a lot of freshwater hobbyists out there are already contributing to the freshwater. Not saying that one's better than the other, but I would like to kind of get the ball rolling for the reefers as well. I do own both salt and freshwater, so it actually helps benefit both community. All right, so let's get to the updates right now. So for the past 2 weeks, you guys probably noticed that I have not posted anything. It's because I actually was moving, and I actually took, I think, about 10 or 11 days off specifically for this move, knowing that I actually had to move 17 tanks and pretty much restart all of them and make sure all the stuff in the house was moved as well. So I knew it was already a big task, and actually 11 days or 10 days is actually probably cutting it kind of close. What's funny is you don't realize how much junk and stuff that you have until you actually move. And actually a lot of stuff that I didn't use or didn't want to, take over to the new house, I ended up actually donating a lot of that to Goodwill. So I actually ended up hiring movers. So there were certain things that I couldn't move myself, let alone with my dad or certain people. It's just because our car wasn't big enough to, hold a refrigerator, hold a washer dryer, hold some of the, sofas, tables. It was just really, items that were just too big for any of our vehicles to handle, and it would just actually take multiple trips if we actually do it. And actually moving and lifting certain things to the second floor wasn't going to cut it for me. So since the movers are already moving some of the big items, I actually asked the guys to also move some of my fish tank. I had 2 racks out in the garage. I actually tore down 1 rack and emptied it completely and had them move all those tanks. I also had them move one of my 54-gallon tanks so that I actually can have enough space to move the fish across to the new house and not have any issues. I want to make sure I give a shout out to the movers at Einstein. These guys were actually amazing, super fast, super efficient. They did all of that in 4 hours, which is basically wrapping, picking it up, putting it in the car, and actually having to do one stop and actually going to my new house and undoing everything. So very fast, very efficient, and those guys were awesome. Once we got the rack system moved over to the new house, my dad and I started building the rack. Now for this setup, I actually changed it slightly. I actually ended up putting the tanks along the walls of the garage and not really horizontal like the other one. Now with the racks along the walls, I actually can film a lot better just because I can actually position the tripod farther to get some of the top tanks. With the old setup, I couldn't do that just because I was limited in terms of the distance. It was still about like 2.5 to 3 foot in terms of distance between the tank to the next tank. But with the tripod and with the tank being so high, I couldn't really get the tripod up high enough to actually film some of them. So with this new setup, hopefully that alleviates that issue. So there's actually a slight difference in this garage versus the old garage. On the new garage, there's actually a noticeable slope in the garage for any rain or water that actually gets into the garage. It actually slopes so that the water can actually flow out into the outside, which is good. The only drawback there is I actually ended up having to use shims to actually level the rack decently. It's still like slightly not perfect, just because it's already on 2 shims. I didn't want to do like 3 shims or something like that. It would have been ridiculous. So once the rack was fully built, I actually started dumping water into the whole system, running the whole plumbing to make sure there was no leak, and to make any minor adjustments with the tubing, just because the rack isn't going to be the same layout as before. Now what's crazy is I actually let the system run overnight and actually threw a bunch of heaters in there to actually get the temperature up. During the setup, I didn't really see any issues in terms of leaking. So the next day when I actually went outside to inspect to make sure there was no leaks, I actually noticed a puddle on the floor, and it was actually a leak coming from one of the actual disconnect valves. So after 4 to 5 times of removing it, cleaning it, and putting them back together, there was always a very, very tiny leak. Always a very tiny leak. No matter how tightened the valve was, there was always a leak. Finally, I actually took it apart and actually inspected it a little bit closer to make sure that there was no gunk. Nothing that was actually preventing the seal to actually seal correctly. And I noticed that there was no O-ring. So probably during the disconnect and move from the old house to the new house, I somehow dropped the O-ring or lost the O-ring in the process. So luckily I actually had another union valve laying around. I grabbed the O-ring from that, threw it on, tightened it, and finally there was no leak. Previously in the old house, I actually had tanks kind of set up everywhere, in the living room, in the former room, in our bedroom, etc. There was actually a lot of tanks everywhere. After talking with the wife, she only wants specific tanks in the house, one main display in the living room, and the rest can kind of go into my study office or my little mini den that I actually have in the first floor. So in the study hall, I plan to actually have my Planet Reef tanks set up on a rack system, along with my other 54-gallon tank, and also my cube tank that I'll probably temporarily house all of my plants in. This was actually the quickest tank that I actually can set up with CO2 to actually toss all my plants into there so that they don't really just die from not having CO2 for a couple of days. And most likely this cube tank will probably be converted to a turtle tank. Right now, Clyde is actually still in the original small tank, just temporarily, just because I don't have a spot set up for Clyde yet. So right now I'm just trying to keep all the fish, plants alive and happy until that I actually can set up some of these tanks properly. Alright guys, and that is the update on the move so far. I still have half of the rack system completely empty, a bunch of tanks empty, just sitting around. I still need to do a lot more work throughout the week, so expect another update next week. But make sure you guys check out the links below for Aquashella, and also the charities that FishTube and Aquashella are teaming up to do. Make sure you guys make a video if you guys can. It doesn't even have to be that long. It can be straight to the point. That will definitely help out a lot of these charities. And if you guys aren't subscribed yet, make sure you guys are subscribed. And like always, until next time guys, peace.